Good morning, everyone. It is a pleasure to contribute to this project. And thank you very much for this invitation to be part of this event today. What I would like to do in this presentation is to share the main findings from our research on how citizens perceive and manage household hazard waste and reflect on what this means for improving separate collection systems. But before getting there, allow me please a few words about my institution. So I work at Nova University Lisbon. It's a Portuguese public university composed of 9 schools, and I work at Nova School of Science and Technology. I am an assistant professor here in waste management within this Department of Environmental Sciences and Engineering. I am also a researcher at Marino, which is part of the Marine and Environmental Science Center, which is a multidisciplinary research center disposed across Portugal. So, with that context in place, the starting point of this work was the European legal framework, of course, under which member states are required to ensure the separate collection of this type of waste by 2025. In Portugal, this requirement was incorporated into our national waste law in 2020, coming into force in 2021. And it was in that context that the study was developed in 2022 during what I will call the pre-implementation phase, with the aim of understanding how citizens perceive and act about this type of waste. Jean-Paul said that at the beginning. So hazardous household waste continues to be found here in Portugal, both in mixed municipal waste and in the separately collected fractions, as shown in physical characterization campaigns carried out by municipal systems. We have 23 municipal systems here in Portugal. And at the same time, it is my opinion that the implementation at municipal level remains quite fragmented, and we still have limited evidence on what actually works. So a lot of work has to be done here. To support the design of our research, of course, in this academic perspective, we first looked at our other studies, and maybe I will cut some information here. But we looked at the importance of practical conditions such as how easy it is to people to access collection points and how convenient the system is for everyday life. Social aspects like awareness, raising awareness, social norms, and risk perception. And this is extremely important for this context, the risk perception. And we also look to the practical barriers and opportunities like storage space at home, system design, and accessibility of disposal options. And altogether, this and of course, a lot of other insights helped us to shape the research approach. For the empirical part of the study, the municipality of Almada was selected as the case study. So Almada is a municipality located in the Lisbon metropolitan area, and it has a high population density. So even higher than Lisbon metropolitan area itself. The municipality, just for a brief context, the municipality is part of the Amarsul waste management system. Amarsul is the name of this entity, this waste management system, which covers 8 other municipalities. You can see that on these slides. For waste management, in general, the responsibilities are shared. So the municipality handles mixed municipal waste collection, and the Amarsul is responsible for the separate collection, the sorting and treatment of waste with all the facilities for that. The system is mainly based on street containers, usually within 100 meters from buildings. And we also have these civic community centers or drop-off municipal centers and on-demand services for bulky waste, green waste, construction waste from do-it-yourself construction activities in private households. However, at the end, however, in 2022, during our study, there was still no dedicated system for household hazard wastes. So, as part of the preparation of the study, this study, interviews were conducted with stakeholders from the surrounding municipalities. I don't have time to get on this part of the study today because it's a lot of information. But we had a questionnaire applied to the residents of Almada municipality. Given the limited resources we had at the time and in this academic context, a convenient sample was employed, and in this context, the findings are not intended to be representative. And we try to answer and to understand these three aspects: knowledge and risk perception about the products, and knowledge and behaviors regarding the management of the products and the wastes as well, and perceptions and opinions of the participants towards a separate collection system. A statistical approach was then applied based on one key question of the questionnaire, measuring the likelihood of using a separate collection system for this type of wastes. This allowed us to distinguish between two groups, those with a lower likelihood and those with a higher likelihood of using such a system. And in total, we received 275 responses. So moving on now to the results. I will start by looking with you at how people perceive the hazardousness of household products. So I will give you just some time to look at this information that you have here. It's a lot of information, but I will try to highlight the main topics, okay? What stands out immediately here is that carbon herbicides and pesticides are generally seen as the most hazardous products. So, and I can also add this information to you. Across all categories, people who are more likely to use a separate collection system tend to perceive higher levels of risk. Okay, this is important. And when we look closely to the results, the differences are important for these types of waste: paints, solvents, car maintenance products, varnishes, and oil-based paints, because we have statistically significant differences here between the two groups. And this is important because it suggests that perceptions of risk are not uniform across the population, and communication strategies may need to reflect that. So we may need to look at these results and understand people perceive the risk in different ways. If we look to the perceived risks more broadly, the most common concern is clearly accidents involving children and pets. And I think this is obvious for us, right? But when we compare the two groups studied, a difference becomes visible. Again, those more likely to use a separate collection system tends to think more about environmental risks such as soil and water contamination or impacts on waste recyclability. And from our perspective, this difference is again important when thinking about how to design the systems and the communication strategies. Looking now at storage behavior, both groups report similar practices, mainly using designated storage spaces at home. However, here I will highlight some of the data. Those more likely to use a separate collection system show slightly stronger adoption of safer practices such as ventilation or protective surfaces. It's in orange on the bottom of the graphic. On the other hand, in blue, Those who are less likely to use a separate system, are more concerned about not mixing these products with foods and about keeping them out of the reach of children. So the results follow, of course, a trend observed previously that are reinforced here. When we ask people what makes a product hazardous, there are no stronger differences between the groups, no statistically significant differences between them. And most people focus on toxicity, flammability, and explosiveness. And this suggests a rather limited understanding of the hazardous characteristics. So on a complementary way to this graphic, we looked at whether respondents check product labels and found that this behavior is only moderate overall, although slightly higher among those likely to use a separate collection system. And we assessed also the knowledge of hazard pictograms and found that it is quite weak as well. So taking all together this information, this points to a clear need to consolidate literacy on these topics. Let's see another perspective of this study here. We move to the management of small quantities of hazardous products, and participants were allowed to select more than one option regarding their practices. You can see the options here of the questionnaire, okay? And overall, most people report appropriate behaviors about the small quantities of the products, okay? And it includes, for example, taking products to municipal drop-off centers, authorized collection points, keeping them for future use, or something like that. However, when we look specifically, not to the products, but for empty packaging, differences become much more evident, and respondents mainly choose practices that are considered incorrect. Okay? So less appropriate behaviors include placing packaging in mixed waste or using recycling bins without proper separation, and a lot of other options that you see here. But this is important, and we have statistically significant differences here between the groups. When it comes to this part of the preferred solutions to manage this type of waste, both groups show a consistent pattern. The clear preference is for fixed, straight containers, seen as convenient and easily accessible, and mobile and curbside systems are generally less popular. The only real difference that we have here is that those more likely to use a separate collection system are more open to returning waste at places like service stations or supermarkets. Okay, this is the difference here. If we look to what people consider important for a successful system, the most important factor is information, especially knowing where to dispose these wastes. Convenience and accessibility come next, followed by information about hazardous products and awareness campaign. Overall, health risks tend to be prioritized, although environmental concerns are stronger among those more likely to use a separate collection system, as we have seen before. What this tells us is that communication matters, but it needs to match how people actually perceive the risk. Even within the group, it's what we can see here in this slide, even within the group that recognize a good solution in the separate waste collection system, awareness campaigns about risk are considered important, especially when compared with the other group. And from these main findings, I can draw some recommendations from this academic perspective. I was invited for this academic perspective. So systems should be built around fixed and accessible infrastructure, supported by clear information on where and how to dispose this type of waste. Mobile collection systems, such as the one recently introduced in Almada municipality, the case study, it's the first image on the slides, can still play a role, but it's only part of the solution. Again, on my opinion, okay? And you have another solution for a retail store on the second image in Almada. Communication, of course, it's also essential, particularly around hazard labels, risk interpretation, and the correct handling of both products and packaging. And it's very important for the empty packaging, as I tried to explain before. So the key point for me here is the alignment between system design and the real citizen behavior. Because, of course, in waste management, we have a lot of laws. We just have to plan things, taking the perception of people in consideration. So to conclude, the findings presented here by me here are based on this article that where you can find more details and complementary information. And this work was developed within a master dissertation of Catarina Pereira, shown on the right side of this slide, under the supervision of Professor Graça Martinho and myself. So thank you very much for your attention, and again for this opportunity, for this invitation. And of course, I'm now happy to take any questions from John Paul or other people in this room. Thank you.